All right, Mr. Belfonte, I believe we're live and we can start our meeting.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thanks. Sorry for the delay. I was trying to watch the other meeting and now I'm watching our meeting and participating. So I'm here. We are about to start the May 11th Amity Regional Board of Education meeting. We're calling the meeting to order at 6:34. And the first order of business is the approval of the minutes. That would be from the Special Board of Education meeting, March 11th, 2020 on page 3. Would someone like to make a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
That's
Okay,
a motion by Ms. Carlson and a second by Ms. Cardozo.
Yes.
great. Okay, any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll call the vote. All those in favor of acceptance?
If you don't mind, I'll call the roll. Just
Yes, and like we spoke about earlier, Dr. Byers, if you and Ms. Pero can work together on that, because I know Ms. Pero usually does this work, but it's very hard for her to take notes of it and also you know, see what everyone's doing. So if you could please call the roll.
absolutely. Mr. Belfonte,
Yes.
Ms. Burke,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Ms. Cardozo,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson. I see a yes. Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. DeMayo. I'm guessing
Yeah.
that's a yes. Okay. Ms. Eichler's not here. Mr. Howard.
Yes.
Excellent. And Ms. Hubbard,
Yes.
Ms. McCrevin.
Yes.
Excellent. Mr. Reed
Yes.
and Dr. Turner.
Yes.
Terrific.
Okay, thank you. The next item is the approval of the minutes from the regular Board of Education meeting from April 20th, 2020 on page 5. Would someone like to make a motion to accept?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, Mr. Howard?
And Mr. Davis, did I see a second there? Okay, Mr. Davis with a second.
Okay. Please call the roll.
All right. Mr. Belfonte,
Yes.
Ms. Burke,
Yes.
Mr. Brow,
Yes.
Ms. Cardozo,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yeah.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. DeMayo. I see thumbs up. Excellent. Mr. Howard. Ms. Hubbard.
Yes.
Great. Sorry, Mr. Howard, I got you there. Ms. McCrevin.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Reed
Yes.
and Dr. Turner.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, the third item is the approval of the minutes from the district meeting, the public hearing on April 27th of 2020 on page 10. Would someone like to make a motion to accept?
I see Ms. Cardozo.
Mhm.
And then Ms. Burke, did you have a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Any discussion on that? Okay, seeing none, we'll call the roll.
All right, Mr. Belfonte,
Yes.
Ms. Burke,
Yes.
Mr. Brow,
Yes.
Ms. Cardozo,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. DeMayo. Thumbs up. Thank you very much. Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Ms. Hubbard,
Yes.
Ms. McCrevin. I see a thumbs up. Excellent. Mr. Reed
Yes.
and Dr. Turner.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you. All right, next item is another approval of the, this time it's the annual meeting on the budget from May 4th, 2020 on page 12. Would someone like to make a motion to accept?
I'll make.
I'm sorry, that was Ms. Cardozo. Ms. Burke, did I hear you too?
Yes, I'll second.
Thank you.
Okay, any comments on that? Okay, seeing none, we'll call the vote.
Mr. Belfonte,
Abstain.
Ms. Burke,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Ms. Cardozo,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Abstain.
Mr. DeMayo,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Ms. Hubbard,
Yes.
Ms. McCrevin,
Yes.
Mr. Reed,
Abstained.
and Dr. Turner.
Yes.
Excellent.
Thank you. Okay, last one. Approval of the minutes from the Special Board of Education meeting, May 4th, 2020 on page 22. Would someone like to make a motion to accept?
Okay, I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Ms. Burke.
Thank you. Second?
Ms. Carlson, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any comments on that one? Okay, I guess we'll call the roll on that.
Mr. Belfonte,
Abstain?
Ms. Burke,
Yes.
Mr. Brow,
Yes.
Ms. Cardozo,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. DeMayo. Some thumbs up. Thank you. Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Ms. Hubbard,
Yes.
Ms. McCrevin.
Yep.
Thank you. Mr. Reed
Abstain.
and Dr. Turner.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is the student report, and I see we have Ms. Gross here with us. So we're looking forward to hearing what you have to say and how you and the rest of the student body are doing.
Yeah, hi. It's nice to see everyone's faces. So the big thing that's happening right now, today was the first day of AP exams. So they're going to be lasting through next week. They're all online and they all are 45 minutes or less, which is kind of nice because they're usually 3 hours long. And the students have handled this transition very well. As far as I've seen, the teachers are a little stressed out, but students are definitely handling it well. So a lot of student groups and clubs are figuring out how to run smoothly from their own houses. And it's really nice to see Zoom sessions and their events still happening. Like right now, the student government elections are taking place for the underclassmen, and the juniors have recently been inducted into the National Honor Society. So the class councils for each grade have been working really hard with the administration to figure out how to still have our class events. And this pertains mostly to the senior class, but we've been working hard to figure out how to have a prom of sorts when we're allowed to get together, even if it has to be over Thanksgiving break, as well as graduation plans. And we've also been posting our college commitments and plans for next year on our senior class social media pages because we missed college t-shirt day. So it's really nice to see what everyone's doing. So yeah, despite our time at high school ending early, we're definitely making the most of it. More personally, we're also trying to start the search for the new student member to replace Ella and I next year. So we're sad about that, but excited. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. We're very excited to have an in-person goodbye as soon as we're allowed to come together again. So yeah, that's the students.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Gross? I had a question for you. I know you mentioned about the college side of things, and usually the Trident, the last issue, I think in June, is the one that shows where everyone's going to either college or the military or out, to the workforce. How are you guys going to relay that information to everyone?
So I think that the Trident is going to be doing that again. They're doing online publications at the moment, and you can look at the if you have access to an Instagram account, it's Amity Class of 2020 is posting all of the plans for next year for people who submit them.
All right, well, that's a good reason for me to join Instagram. Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions for Ms. Gross?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Davis.
just a question related to scholarship applications. To your knowledge, at least, do you know if any students that are having trouble with scholarship application or getting to their guidance counselors, has there anything been that you're aware of become a problem in that area?
I haven't heard of any problems with that. A lot of scholarships closed a few weeks ago. And I know a lot of my friends applied to all of those, and our counselors have been really good about checking in with us a lot. So,
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. Okay, well, we'll move on to our next item, which is the superintendent's report, found on page 23 as the personnel report.
So just Mr. Davis, for your edification, we are going to have our a virtual version of our scholarship night to award those scholarships to those students who have received them. We're still working on how that might look, but we are planning on that. Additionally, on sort of a more serious note, I know that the FAFSA, the Federal Application for Student Financial Aid, is allowing students to go in and revise that if there are some unusual circumstances that have impacted their families because of COVID. And I know our counselors are helping our kids in both of those areas. So I expect that we'll have a different version of that scholarship award ceremony that may be preserved indefinitely coming forward in the next couple of years. I don't often make comments on the personnel report, but I do want to recognize that we received a retirement notice today of Mrs. Helen Young. She is a Spanish teacher at Amity Middle School, Bethany, who is retiring after 50, yes, that is 50 years in education. And it is rare and unusual that we're able to make that kind of announcement in recognition of a teacher who has spent literally half of a century teaching the students of our town. And so I do wish her congratulations on that decision and that announcement. As far as the superintendent's report, you know, some of the things that we've been working on, you'll notice that there were a couple mentions of our virtual advisories that are happening at our middle schools. So essentially, once we kind of got the online learning underway, we started doing some programs where we could reach out to the students just to kind of give them an opportunity to sort of vent, talk about their concerns, talk about the struggles in the advisory setting with their teachers and with their peers and with their friends. And those have been extremely well attended and well received with our middle schools. You will see that Ms. Mann was a presenter on a NEASC panel regarding sort of end of year preparations, and a rather significant group of us are participating in those where we're able to share ideas with oftentimes thousands of participants across the world of how we're all coping and dealing with this in our schools. Tomorrow we'll be participating in one with some of the countries overseas that have actually started to reopen to see what we can learn from them in terms of the reopening process. Last week was Teacher Appreciation Week, and although it was not the way we wanted it to be, I will have to say our students and our PTSOs came through and did some amazing videos and thank yous and tributes and opportunities to appreciate how much their teachers mean to them and how much work that they've done. And on behalf of everybody, I'd like to publicly acknowledge to the board our incredible gratitude for our teachers and everything that they've managed to accomplish prior to March 12th, and then also certainly after March 12th. We are in the middle of our PE locker room clean out at the high school. The process and the plan that we used to do this, we cleared through the Quinnipiac Valley Health District, and it sort of is becoming our model for how we might do other events where we have to have students come to the school, whether it's to return materials or to collect materials, or potentially to participate in some of our end of year celebrations. So far that's been fairly successful, and we're pleased with how that has gone. I know one of the questions that's sort of foremost on everybody's mind is graduation and sort of what we can and cannot do with respect to graduation ceremonies and observations. I can also sense that, there's sort of frustration that we haven't really come up with a plan yet. So I just want to let the board know that we're currently waiting for the Connecticut State Department of Education. The commissioner and the Department of Public Health are supposed to be giving schools some guidelines that we can operate under. Hopefully sometime this week, if not, definitely, I'm thinking we'll get it sometime next week. And certainly anything that we do is going to have to fall within those guidelines and recommendations. We are going to have to comply with whatever executive orders are still in place at the time. And so we're just kind of waiting for that before we start coming up with plans. We'll still continue to have maybe a couple of ideas in the works, but the closer we get to June 10th, the closer we're going to have to get to making some firm decisions. And when we do that, they are going to have to adhere to the recommendations and the guidelines that are coming to us from the State Department. So we will let people know what we are going to do as soon as we can. But I do want to caution everyone that it may not be everything that we want, because we are going to have to still comply with the executive orders and the regulations that are in place. And so we will wait for those and certainly do our best under those guidelines. And that is it for the superintendent's report.
Okay, and Dr. Byers, just to piggyback on what you were mentioning about graduation, I know, I'm not sure if everyone is aware of it, but I believe it was Ms. Mann sent out an email a few days ago, and there's going to be, I believe, a PTSO meeting tomorrow night at 7, remotely, of course, for parents of seniors to discuss end of the year activities. And it just gives, I think, people an opportunity to hear people's ideas and to also add to that. So I know a lot of the parents are looking forward to that, as are the students.
And I can confirm that Ms. Mann let me know that there are 173 RSVPs as of this evening. So I think we'll have quite a crowd at the PTSO forum.
That's great, really great. Okay, thank you. Moving on to item number 5, correspondence. I know Ms. Eichler couldn't join us tonight. Dr. Byers, do we have any correspondence worth noting?
I have not received any correspondence myself, nor do I know of any that Ms. Eichler has received. And certainly if she has, I'm sure she can share it at our next meeting, but I'm not aware of any.
Okay, thank you. And then we'll move on to item 6, which is the chairman's reports. Before we go to the individual reports, I did have just a comment from the chair. So it's regarding public comment. I know there's been some discussion and some concern that we have not had public comment on our meetings, with the exception of the one meeting we had in late April. And there's a reason for that. And I think Dr. Byers communicated it to us, but also I just wanted to go on record with the public to let them know why that is. And it was basically an edict from the governor that said the meetings are supposed to be kept to any items that are critical items and votable items, things that we have to vote on as board. And that's from, I think, late March until the foreseeable future, until things change. So with that, we made a decision not to include the public comment section in the meetings. However, I do want to assure the public that we are still here for you, and that there is still a forum for you to speak to us. And that the best forum is actually our website. So many of you know it already, but it is amityregion5.org. And that 5 is a number 5. So again, amityregion5.org. From there, you could click on the BOE section, and then you can click on BOE members, and you can email us any sort of attached email, a comment, a question, what have you. You could send it to all of us or just myself, whatever you like. But I assure you, anything that is something that is appropriate will be put into our minutes. And items will also be summarized quickly during the next meeting's correspondence section. So the public certainly still has a forum to do this, and we wanted to make everyone aware of that. So thank you. And then we'll move on to the committee reports. The first item is district technology, the monthly report to be found on page 27. I don't know if we wanted to highlight anything, Dr. Byers, or?
I think just one of the things to highlight, so if you had looked at so the ticket summary that's over on the left-hand side, those are the number of direct requests for assistance and for help that our technology department receives. And you'll see that there's a significant decrease from March, which had, around 250, down to the 38 that we have in April. So that's kind of an indication that we were kind of fast and furious getting the off-site learning up and running and making sure everything was supported. And we were able to do that efficiently for our students. And now we see a significant decline. Again, sort of, I think, signifying that we have things in place to allow the off-site learning to sort of move forward in the manner that we hoped it would.
Okay, thank you. The next item is the facilities monthly report found on page 28. Is there anything we would like to highlight there, Dr. Byers? Or?
No, I don't think so. We will bring a few bid proposals forward later on in the meeting. I will say that we are going to start on after May 20th with the opportunity for some staff to return to the schools so that we can get classrooms cleaned up and begin preparation for summer cleaning. But we're waiting until May 20th in compliance with the governor's executive orders before we do that.
Thank you. Mr. Brow, did you have a comment?
No, I was just going to jump in and say I noticed the tube, looked like the tubes have been cleaned at the school, and I know there's been some summer cleaning already done, and just for our custodial staffs to thank them for continuing to do that work and keeping the school clean in preparation, whether we came back or not, it was an unsure.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. And then we can move on to our finance section. I believe our first order of business is the discussion of the first quarter 2020 executive summary review of the Amity Pension Fund sick and severance account and the OPEB trust found on page 29. And is Mr. Goss available from FIA for this, or are we taking this on our own here?
So I believe Mr. Goss is not intending to join us, and that Ms. Loomis could summarize, or anybody who was as part of the AFC meeting could summarize what Mr. Goss said, but I will turn it over to Ms. Loomis at this point in time.
Thank you.
Yes, so Mr. Goss presented at the AFC meeting and, commented that the last time he presented was at, complete market highs, both for the pension fund, all our funds, the rates, and then full employment. And the picture, is quite different today. And the report that you have in the packet shows, significant losses for the pension fund, nearly $2 million. However, the bright spot was that he did share a spreadsheet with balances as of yesterday, I believe. And we have recouped about 50% of those losses. So while everything that's happened in the markets has been very volatile, large swings. So unlike other downturns that take time to, materialize and time to come out of, we seem to be, we went into this rather rapidly and, have had a large turnaround. Don't know exactly where it's going from here, but at this point, it looks better than it did at the end of March. The positive was that, they rebalanced our account. We're staying the course. We're not doing a mass sell-off. And he also had a graph that he showed us, how important it was to be in the market on the, throughout the course, and that even over history that, being out of the market for even 40 days could have an overall impact on your returns. So the federal government's actions of the CARES Act, putting in the stimulus funds, he feels has really been part of the reason why the market has rebounded the way it is, and that there is potentially perhaps another $1 trillion coming from the federal government is helping to stabilize the markets for now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, we can move on to the second item if there's not any questions on that. Okay, So the second item under finance is the discussion and possible action on contracts over 35,000 found on page 89. Ms. Loomis, would you like to take us through that with Ms. Cardozo's assistance?
Sure. We have 3 contracts. The first being for liability, auto, property insurance, LAP through KERMA. And they have offered, we are in the coming up on the last year of a current 3-year contract, which would be capped at a maximum increase of 3%. They are offering, if we re-sign for a new 3-year period. I understand the wording's a little bit awkward in that last sentence of the first paragraph, but it's really a new 3-year period. They will offer us a 3% decrease for next year. That's a savings of about $5,400 over what the potential could have been and what we budgeted at that capped 3% increase. We've had excellent service with them. And I think I'm recommending that we stay with KERMA and have a 3-year contract starting next year.
Okay, thank you. Would someone like to make a motion to accept that, and then we can have more discussion?
I'll make a motion to accept the karma that Ms. Loomis just presented to us.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Mr.
So
Brown?
at first, and Ms. Para, just to confirm, it was first by Ms. Carlson, second by Mr. Brow.
Does anyone have any comments or questions regarding this?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to mention that the Amity Finance Committee did approve this.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, seeing none, we can call the vote. We'll do roll call.
Mr. Belfanti,
Yes.
Ms. Burke,
Yes.
Mr. Brow,
Yes.
Ms. Cardozo,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. DeMayo. See a thumbs up. Thank you, sir. Mr. Howard,
I think he dropped off.
he did. I thought oh no, I see him there. Mr. Howard,
Oh, they came back. Okay.
He looks frozen.
he looks a little frozen, but I think maybe we got a yes. We'll take that as a yes and we can amend that. Ms. Hubbard,
Yes.
excellent. Ms. McCrevin,
Yes.
very good. Mr. Reed
Yes.
and Dr. Turner,
Yes.
fabulous.
Thank you. Okay, now we move on to the second item under that section, the paving bond.
So as part of the recently approved bonded projects, it was paving the parking lot here at Amity High School. We're proposing doing it in 2 sections. We had 21 contractors who received the bid, 7 submitted bids. We had budgeted $2.50 a square foot. With the recent decline in gas prices, the bids came in at $1.64 per square foot to $3.08 per square foot. The low bidder is B&W Paving and Landscape of Waterford. They had many municipal references, which Jim Sisa checked out, and they came back positive, and he is comfortable recommending that. It will be for the first section of the parking lot to be done this summer. And next year we will rebid because these prices will not hold for that long.
Okay. So would someone like to make a motion to accept?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Second. Okay, Ms. Burke, thank you. Any comments?
I just have a question for Terry. Is there any way that we can, I know you said we're going to do this again next year, but is there any negotiating with them about a price for the additional contract that they might be willing to hold for us? Not necessarily at this rate, but at any rate?
We can ask them, but generally, because of the volatility in the oil market, they don't guarantee out months, let alone a year. But we can ask them and see what it would be.
Just thinking it couldn't hurt. Maybe if they're locked in, they guarantee the job, they might be willing.
Sure.
Thank you.
I also had a question. Did this come as a recommendation from the Finance Committee?
Yes, in fact, it did, Sheila. It was approved by the Finance Committee.
Thanks.
My pleasure.
Okay. Mr. Brown?
Basically, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Yeah. We're going to be the beneficiaries of the low oil prices right now. And this is about as best as it can be as far as paving contracts. So, but I mean, I'm all for checking back when we're ready to do phase 2, but this is probably the best price we can get. I think the original price was what, $250 a square
Right.
foot?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Okay. Can we call the vote?
Mr. Belfonte?
Yes.
Ms. Burke?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Cardozo?
Yes.
Ms. Carlson?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. DeMayo? Thumbs up. Thank you very much. Mr. Howard has left us again, so perhaps Ms. Para, we can just say he abstained in case he's able to join us again. Ms. Hubbard?
Yes.
Ms. McCrevin?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
And Dr. Turner?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to the next item, and that is transportation. Again, found on page 90.
So this is a request to approve the specific contracts to the specific owner operators that of the board contract approved back in March. The board approved the template of the contract that we worked out with Bethany and Woodbridge for the rates and the language. And you have a list in your packet of each of the contract holders. We negotiated with the current owner operators, and we are presenting the current owner operators. There's no changes to Amity. And what you're seeing is Amity's contracts. Some of these people may work also for some of the other districts.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Loomis. Would someone like to make a motion to accept and we can discuss?
Make the motion to accept, Chair Belfonte.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I see a second from Ms. Cardozo.
Okay. I know there was definitely some discussion regarding this, Ms. Cardozo, during the AFC meeting. Would someone like to discuss that? Ms. Cardozo?
There was discussion. The AFC did approve it, not unanimously, however. The discussion was around the actual insurance required that was recommended by our attorneys, as well as our insurance company. I think we've discussed that at a previous meeting, but certainly we can, I'll defer to Dr. Byers to just kind of recap that briefly.
So there was a question around the need to include the additional insurance for sexual harassment and molestation for each individual owner operator. And I think what happened is that insurance used to be included as part of the general liability policies that bus companies were able to obtain. Basically, within the past year, insurance companies sort of took that out of general liability, probably because we live in a litigious society and they saw that as a risk. Both our attorneys, as well as the attorneys for the other boards of education who are also negotiating with us, as well as Karma themselves, who's our insurance company, all recommended that our owner operators have that as part of their separate policy. Not to get into the nitty gritty of the negotiations, but we did have some back and forth discussion with the owner operators who were at the table because we did, they presented that it was a cost to them. And we lowered somewhat our expectations to kind of meet them in the middle and to achieve some sort of compromise. They, of course, the owner operators approved the contract with that language in it. The board approved that contract back in March, if I remember correctly, with that language in it. So what we're really looking at here is not approval of the contract language, but actually awarding the contracts to the owner operators who have essentially to be truthful, already signed the paperwork with us to return as drivers for us for the next 5 years.
Thank you, Dr. Bowers. Would anyone like to add to that or make a comment regarding this?
Yeah, I'll bring up the comment I brought up in the AFC meeting as well, which was around this insurance, the extra cost, and the way it plays out is this can be as much as $5,000 added on. And if a bus route is worth $55,000 to $57,000, an extra $5,000 cost that was not being expected is quite a bit added on to that. And if you are a multi-bus company like B&B, where you have 13 runs, you can spread that cost out. While you may take a higher amount, it's not the same cost overall. And so it really, we talk about supporting the independent bus operators and keeping that a viable option for people in the town. And I just felt like this extra cost, this insurance cost, was not fair to the independents. It might work very well for the larger companies, but again, to the independents, it doesn't really work. It wasn't something Orange had done. I was talking earlier, and we said that it wasn't an option then, or it wasn't necessary then. But I did do a little search around the state on some of the other bus contracts, and I know they're long-term contracts usually, but I didn't see it many other areas either where it's been used. In there were some schools, but it didn't look like it had been widespread, and that could be a timing issue. I just think we need to consider the impact that we're having on these independent bus operators.
Mention was made earlier about how this coverage used to be included in the general liability portion, and now it's a separate entity. And I know we were asking originally for a $2 million policy, and now we are looking for a $1 million policy for all these owner operators to carry. So I'm just curious, I don't think we discussed this last month or 2 months ago, but what is the net cost to these individuals that, it was included in the GL policy and now they have to carry it separately? If it is, say, $5,000 now as a separate number, did they see credit on their GL because they're not covering this? Or is this kind of a power play for the insurance companies to get more money?
I don't think we have an answer to that, because I think depending on who the insurance provider was, they had some vastly different numbers. And I don't know. And again, just as a reminder, the independent owner operators, we contract with them as a Board of Education. So it is their responsibility to find the insurance company that provides them with the best policies, to find the insurance companies that provides them with the best rates. That's their responsibility as the independent owner operator. So we tend not to involve ourselves in that, because really it's their business that we're running and the board is contracting with them. And again, with all due respect to the concerns for the owner operator, we are talking about a policy that protects kids against sexual harassment and molestation. And so I would just have the board, I understand that there's a cost, but please keep in mind what the purpose of this policy is. I do think it was unfortunate timing that caused it to come to light during our particular negotiations. But I think certainly I feel confident in standing behind that request, that we are protecting kids in that area. And I would honestly feel negligent if we weren't, especially knowing that we should be.
Okay, Ms. McCrevin.
Yeah, so I think I understand that the context of this vote right now, that the contract has already been negotiated, it's already been signed.
That's correct.
And we're talking about things that would fundamentally change that contract if the board was inclined to pursue any of it. So my question, I guess, is what would be the format we would need, or the approach we would need to take if we wanted to essentially kind of renegotiate this clause or change the compensation to essentially compensate for some of the costs that is being borne already as it's been written out into this contract? So do we have to reopen negotiation, or is there no ability to do that? Does that put the whole thing back on the table, or is this something that can be individually negotiated just as a standalone without reopening the whole contract?
You would have to, I believe you would have to reopen the whole negotiation process. And again, keep in mind that this was kind of one of our first attempts to do a shared service where 3 out of the 4 districts negotiated collaboratively and together so that we would all have legitimately the exact same contract with the exact same language, with the exact same expectations. So not only would you open up the contract again, but you would also be working against the negotiations that occurred for 2 of our sending towns, both of whose boards of ed also approved the contract, much in the same way you did back in March, and who are probably also at this point approving the individual award of the contracts to their owner operators during the upcoming months.
So it would be an awful big deal if we were looking to unwind this particular component of it. It's the compensation package essentially, and that's the basis of the contract, right?
And certainly, Ms. McCrevin, as COVID has shown us, we can achieve anything, but I do think that it would be something that would be, it would be a pretty significant move on the part of our board to undo that. And again, we would be going against advice of insurance, of our own insurance provider, as well as our attorneys, particularly with respect to that clause.
All right. Can I ask a completely separate question, but dealing with this, you mentioned the COVID situation. If we're going to see disruption of our learning environment and transportation needs next year, and we need to do some sort of negotiation at that point, perhaps we would be reopening, or how would we handle that?
Well, again, I imagine it would be similar to what we did this year, where we have an MOU with the actual contractors. But again, even the MOU that we crafted this year, we did that jointly as of our 3 towns. And to some extent, we followed a similar pattern as the 4th town. So we all essentially ended up with very similar MOUs to make adjustments. And that would be my only recommendation, is that we would do MOUs, because those really sort of, they serve as placeholders during time, for very short periods of time during times of uncertainty.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Brown, sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. So I've never met a lawyer who didn't like the idea of reducing risk by adding something new or a new provision. And I haven't met an insurance salesman that hasn't thought extra insurance was also a good idea. That being said, when I did look at the larger districts around the state that are using this kind of insurance, they are all using a kind of a DATCO or a first student approach. They're not independent operators. And one of the reasons we have independent operators is we like that knowledge of knowing who's driving our kids to school. And that's why we don't worry as much or at all about these types of liabilities from sexual assault on a school bus. That being said, there's no guarantees in life. The idea of protecting the kids with this, I don't know how many cases there have been in the past, in the last 50 something years of the bus contracts with the independent operators. But I also would like to say that the contract we have now is, it's good till the end of June. This contract would start then and go for 5 years. So whatever we do now, as we said, this insurance can be as high as $4,000 to $8,000 per operator. So that's a significant decrease in their ability to make money, on top of an MOU that's already decreased their earnings for this year. I just think, we're benefiting the B&Bs, or we're going to drive these smaller operators out of business. And this is going to be a, last ditch. Now, we could take our time and slow down a little bit. We're just now at the beginning of May. We could have more discussions around this over the next 2 months, and at least have some public comment. As you said at the beginning of the meeting, these operators are normally pretty vocal. They're willing to come out to a meeting. They're willing to have these discussions. But we've basically muzzled our public, where they've written in some letters. We've had some first selectmen comment, but we haven't really had a chance for this kind of normal grassroots feedback that we would get in this kind of a situation. And we're about to agree to a contract that will go for 5 years.
So the contract was on the March agenda, which I believe there was public comment available at the March agenda. And that was really where we, had the tenets of the contract.
Yeah, and again, just to clarify, the owner operators, I don't think they ratify because they're not unionized, but they both agree to the contract, but they literally have received copies of this contract and signed it. At this point, we're not asking the board to approve the language of the contract. We're asking you to approve the awarding of the contract to the owner operators who've already signed the piece of paper and said, yes, we agree to this and we would like to drive for Amity.
No, I understand that. What I raised before too is what other choice would they have? If we're already using the contractors that we've used, if they've got 3 or 4 representatives that have done the negotiation over the last few months, they were also in the process of trying to figure out how much this extra insurance was going to cost them. And that wasn't known at the time. It's since become more clear. And that's why we're starting to hear these comments back from these owner operators. So yes, they've signed the contract. Yes, they're agreeing to it right now because they really don't have any other choice. I'm just saying for the next 5 years, we're driving these people away from this role as independents, as single bus driver and owner operators.
And again, as part of the negotiation process, we actually had a rather lengthy hiatus, I guess you could call it, when we first proposed this additional insurance, and they came back and they said, no, that's not doable. And so we asked them to seek out what the cost would be and what they agreed would be an acceptable alternative proposal, which is how we came to the compromise of the 1 million coverage at minimum. And it, and Ms. Loomis, you probably have the timeline better than I do, but it was several weeks that we were sort of waiting for them because, again, we wanted to give them an opportunity to come back during the negotiation process with a proposal that they thought that they could meet. And so, again, the content of the contract is really not for right now what's at question. Again, it's giving the contracts to the owner operators at this point.
Right, but the board involvement can be upfront, or it can also be during the negotiations, and it can be at the awarding. And at this point, we're at the awarding stage, and this is our last chance to have some input on the contract.
So can I ask a clarifying question? What the motion we're going to be asked to vote on is to award the contracts in the list that's been presented to us. If we say no, that doesn't do anything to change the contract.
That's true. I think that would basically put us back to square one, though, and we'd have to have an honest discussion if we would like to make a change to the contract, and we'd have to bring that up as a vote, and then we would have to go through the process again.
And at a minimum, tonight's action would award the contract so these folks would know they have a contract. I'd be hard pressed to not move forward awarding the contracts, especially in this climate that we're in economically. I don't think we can do that to people. They've signed documents and we're just agreeing that, yeah, that signed document means you have the awarded contract. Is that a fair understanding of what we're going to be voting on?
That summarizes it, yes.
All right, thank you.
Does anyone else have any comments regarding the subject? Okay. Ms. Loomis, did you have something? Oh, I saw your light up around your.
Oh,
okay.
I moved paper, I think.
Okay. Okay. Well, if no one has any other comments.
Could I just ask a question?
Yes, Ms. Burke.
Of Pat, maybe with the finance committee, you said it was not unanimous. What were some of the, could you elaborate maybe on, I'm just curious of some of the, I can't hear you. Can everybody else?
Robin, yeah, Robin, it was basically the same points I raised here for the most part.
Oh, okay.
There was 5 of us on the yeah, there's 5 of us on the call. It was most of the same points.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay. All right, at this point, I feel we heard from a lot of different people and we should probably vote unless anyone has anything else. Okay, so we'll call the roll call vote.
Mr. Belfanti,
Abstain?
Ms. Burke.
I'm going to abstain also.
All right, Mr. Brown,
No.
Ms. Cardozo,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Abstain?
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. DeMayo. I see a no. Mr. Howard.
Abstain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's hang on. Ms. Hubbard,
Abstain.
Ms. McCrevin,
Yes.
Mr. Reed,
Yes.
and Dr. Turner.
Sorry, yes.
Okay. Ms. Perro, sorry, I couldn't get the count on that. I'm guessing the motion did not pass. Ms. Perro, I'm sorry, can you come
Sorry.
off of mute?
Yeah, there were 5 yeses. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 abstains. And 2 noes.
Was it 6-2?
So the motion
think-
passed.
No,
So
there
the
were
motion passes 5-2?
5-2?
Yes.
5 yeses, 2 noes.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Now we'll move on to item C, the discussion and possible action on healthy food certification.
This is the annual motions we bring forward to the board to participate in the healthy foods. And again, I remind you that this brings in about $11,000 a year from the State Department. And the program and the requirements basically mirror the USDA requirements. So by participating in the National School Lunch Program, we are basically bound to the same food standards, but by signing on with the state, we do get the additional bump of about $11,000. So there's 3 motions. The Amity Finance Committee approved all 3. One is that we will follow the requirements and you authorize the superintendent to sign that document, and that we allow 2 exceptions, an exception to the healthy food standards at events outside of the school day, in fundraisers not part of the school day, and in events that are not part of the school or out from a vending machine. And also that beverages will meet the guidelines except in those special circumstances at the outside of the school day or at special events.
Okay, thank you. Would someone like to make a motion to accept all 3 and then we can discuss?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Ms. McCrevin, thank you.
Sorry, Ms. Burke was the first and Ms. McCrevin was second.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Does anyone have any comments regarding this? Okay. Then we could call the vote. Roll call.
All right, Mr. Belfanti,
Yes.
Ms. Burke,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
excellent. Ms. Cardozo,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. DeMayo. Thumbs up. Thank you very much. Mr. Howard,
Yes.
excellent. Thumbs up. Thank you. Ms. Hubbard,
Yes.
terrific. Ms. McCrevin, thumbs up. Thank you. Mr. Reed
Yes.
and Dr. Turner.
Yes.
Great.
Okay, that passes. Thank you. Now we'll move on to the next item, the discussion and possible action on increasing lunch prices, found on page 95.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairperson, we just voted to vote on all 3 together, but we didn't vote on the actual motions yet.
We voted on the motion to accept 3, but we didn't vote on the motion. You're right. Thank you, Ms. Perro. You're correct. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Okay,
I'd like to make
call
that
the-
motion.
Call the vote. Well, actually, we have to make a motion, correct? Ms.
So I see
Cardozo.
Ms. Cardozo with a first
Thank you.
and Mr. Reed with a second.
Thank you. Okay, we'll call that vote.
All right, Mr. Belfanti,
Yes.
Ms. Burke,
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Cardozo,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. DeMayo, Yes, thank you. Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Hubbard?
Yes.
Ms. McCrevin? Yes. Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Dr. Turner?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that motion passes. Thank you. Now we'll move on to the discussion of possible action on increasing lunch prices. On page 95, please.
Yes, you have a memo in your packet from Kathy Kovalek, the Assistant Director of Finance, to the Superintendent. She and I worked with the representatives from Chartwell's. You probably recall that I brought to your attention back in February. The school lunch program is not running at a self-sustaining operation any longer due to many factors, and lunch prices, is a contributing factor. So we currently have 5 tiers at the high school, which is unusual for schools. They usually have 2 or 1 price. And we are, one, suggesting collapsing the tiers and also raising them at certain price levels. So the grill meal is currently the most popular meal, followed closely by pizza. And we're proposing making that the same price at $3.50, which is neutral for grill, but an increase of 30 cents for pizza. The Create and Sono are at staggered prices, and we're looking to bring them to 1 tier at $3.70, which is a decrease on the Sono of a dime and an increase on the Create at 15 cents. And the Deli is a standalone, and that is proposed being increased 15 cents. Also, so all the middle school lunch prices would be $3.30 at this proposal, and the adult price for middle school would be $5, which is the same as the adult price for high school. We looked at, should the current purchasing pattern prevail next year, that this could increase revenue approximately $49,000. We know that ongoing maintenance and software costs upwards of $25,000 to $30,000 a year on our equipment. And the program was running at a loss in March when we abruptly closed. You have some comparison pricing there. These prices fall right in our Derby range of prices. So that is the basis for the request.
Thank you. Would someone like to make a motion on page 96?
Be happy to make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Ms.
Second.
Carlson?
See a second from Ms. Carlson.
Thank you. Any discussion? Yes, Ms. McCrevin.
I have a question regarding what is driving the costs so that our meals are not keeping pace. And I wondered if there's a component of the cost that is being driven by health insurance costs for the staff that are preparing and serving meals.
They are under a contract with Chartwell's, and they are at the end of a 3-year contract, so they will enter into negotiations for their upcoming contract.
So do we know what the cost for health insurance is, if that's a driving factor in this? And my concern is that on the previous board that I served, we certainly saw that the cost of lunches could not keep up with the cost of health insurance and was never going to. So I know that we're not directly supplying the insurance for these folks, but if that's part of the factor that we're dealing with, we're going to be hard pressed to keep up. We can't just keep, the small amounts of increments of raising the price of lunch is not going to do it when we're required to serve some of these meals. So we have to have a certain amount of staff, which means those people have to have health insurance. It's just sort of a vicious cycle. I don't know if you guys have insight into how this is pushing us in this direction.
I don't know if we have insight into that. I think we do have some evidence that suggests that the number of families that are qualifying for free and reduced lunch has increased, and it's nothing related to COVID. And Ms. Loomis could probably speak to this a little bit more. But the requirements on how those individuals qualify changed. And when those requirements changed, we saw a bump in that, which means we're therefore producing more meals that we are not necessarily, we're only getting reimbursed by the federal government, which is significantly less than what that price is. And I know that was part of the discussion that we had when we knew we were going to have to fund the cafeteria a little bit more. And Ms. Loomis, I don't know if you have some other thoughts on that, but I do remember having that as part of our conversation.
Right, that happened in March of, I can't remember if it was 18 or 19, that the state changed the Medicaid requirements and really, made it much more affordable, many more people eligible for Medicaid. And we saw our numbers that were below, 75 total in the district now are probably approaching 300 of families eligible. That would indicate that those folks also maybe don't have extra money in their pockets to be buying the a la carte items and things that would also subsidize the program. So that coupled with aging equipment in the cafeterias needing, to be repaired are some of the driving factors to the program. So that Medicaid eligibility component has significantly changed across the state. All districts are experiencing this. When I'm on my calls with the CASBO folks, their food service programs are in serious trouble.
So I guess I would just, I know it's not something we can affect between now and the start of school. So the vote tonight is for next year's prices, but I would just encourage, if there are other ways that the board could subsidize the cafeteria, send money into that account so that we don't have to try to raise prices on meals, because at a certain point there's diminishing returns here. People are just going to buy less. So, but I guess this is for a next year discussion on the next round of this. Thank you.
I will be coming to you in June with a request to transfer money in, knowing that if these prices increase will affect then how much I have to ask you for. So it's kind of like laying the groundwork as to what will that number be.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
Sheila?
Yes.
So what you're seeing is an insurance cost driving the costs of a vendor.
Yeah. Isn't
right?
that
higher,
incredible? Mm-hmm.
Right? Higher, yeah. And causing more pressure on that vendor. And that vendor has to respond to that.
Right. And I think the board needs to think about creative ways to head that off. And I agree that everywhere that's happening, we have to think of creative ways.
Right. And we have a responsibility to feed the children, just like we have a responsibility to transport the children.
Yes, in the fall.
Right.
Hopefully.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Hey, can I ask one other question on that? Yeah. What's the federal rebate on that $3 lunch roughly?
It is around, I believe, maybe $3.20 a meal. I don't have it exactly in front of me, but it's a little over.
But it's almost the cost of what we're charging people for.
Yes.
Okay.
And we will have to, if they increase that, we will also have to keep our rates above that level.
Yeah, you can't be below them, right? Yeah, yeah. Whatever they raise will have to increase. And that's the other pressure that we have to be concerned of on people. If they go to 360, we have to go to 360 minimum.
Correct. Yep.
Right. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, we can call the vote, please. Roll call.
Absolutely. Mr. Belfanti.
Yes.
Ms. Burke.
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Ms. Cardozo.
Oh, yes.
Thank you. Ms. Carlson. Thumbs up. Thank you very much. Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Mr. DeMayo. Thumbs up. Thank you. Mr. Howard.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Hubbard.
Yes.
Ms. McCrevin.
Yes.
Mr. Reed.
Yes.
And Dr. Turner.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That passes. Next item is the discussion of the monthly financial statements found on page 97.
So again, this month, lots of changes. It was just a few days before this report needed to be sent out that we found out school was closed for the rest of the year. So trying to implement as many of those changes into this report. So on the revenue side, you'll see a decrease of $9,500, and that is largely refunding everyone who paid for parking $25 the last quarter of the year, trying to assist families a little bit. And then you see swings in salary, favorable for the district as far as, overtime, substitutes, coaches, decreases there, unpaid leave of absences, and then the corresponding payroll taxes that are estimated to go down with the lower salaries. Transportation, you see a decrease based on the MOU that we reached with the owner operators for the closure for April through June, along with changes to special ed. So that's not all just the owner operators. Tuition is the normal changes in special ed tuition month to month. You will also see some increases in lines, and those really have to do with the budget transfers that will follow next in the packet. And those are largely items we took out of the 2021 budget, with maybe the exception of one or two that are new items due to the COVID environment and things that have come up. But the forecast also includes putting aside 1% into the capital reserve. Right now, that is a placeholder. You're not asking to approve that tonight. That's just to show you what the balance would look like should you approve that closer to the close of the audit in August or September. Health insurance is down. Basically, people not able to getting routine visits done, whether it's dental, medical. Again, talking to my colleagues across the state who are self-insured, this is very common as to what they're seeing. Also very worrisome that when we are fully operational, unable to go back to our medical appointments as we once were, that we could likely see an uptick in this, but that could very well happen in next year's budget cycle.
Thank you, Ms. Loomis. Do either you or Dr. Byers care to expound a little bit on the 1%? I know that's something we've had discussions on as a board the last couple of years. And with this year, it seems there's a better reason than other years to have at least a good look at that. So if you guys could expound on that, that would be helpful.
Absolutely, certainly. I can share the same information I shared with AFC, which is, we would really hope that there would be some significant, serious consideration for this in the upcoming year, simply because of the major unknowns that we're facing. So I have kind of three primary areas of concern right at the moment. Ms. Loomis referred to the health insurance as the first one, and we certainly know that people are not able to do routine visits or elective surgeries right now. And we believe that is part of the reason why we're seeing our claims go down in the past couple of months. It just means that people are deferring things that at some point they will need to attend to. And we have a concern that most likely many of those things will occur after July 1st, and we will start to see an uptick in those claims. The second primary area of concern is around special education and the services that we will need to provide for students in not just necessarily next year, but for several years to come to make up for what we have not been able to provide through offsite learning. The third is just what is going to be necessary to run school next year. And so we don't have a lot of indications on things, but for example, one of the recommendations that came out was that we would need to purchase 3 masks per student per day. So you need one for before lunch, one for after lunch, and then a spare. 3 masks per student per day is going to run close to $500,000. if we are to provide the PPEs just to open school. So with all, and again, we have no idea what it's going to look like, but the plexiglass dividers and things we've grown accustomed to in stores, we may need to install in parts of the school. There are just so many unknowns for what we have to do to reopen the school year and what next year could bring. Whereas municipal school districts could always go back to their town finance committees and ask for additional allocations and appropriations, we cannot as a Board of Education. We would have to go back to the voters. And at this point in time, in an uncertain climate, again, I think that that would present a difficulty if that was not approved. So while we have money that the voters have approved, it really would be my recommendation that we set that aside for the unknowns that we have coming to us, precisely because of the situation we're in right now, and that we may face again next year.
Thank you. Does anyone have any comments or questions regarding the financials? Okay. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item F, which is the Director of Finance and Administration's approved transfers under $3,000 found on page 126.
If I could just draw your attention, Chairman Belfanti, to the last transfer, transfer 74, really belongs on the end of year transfers that are over 3,000. It got swept up inadvertently in the under 3,000. So for a good audit trail and proper procedure, we need to, when we are ready to make the motions over 3,000, to include that particular item as well.
Okay, that is the 4,656.
A total of, it's 3 lines altogether for a total of $5,031.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Then we can move on to discussion and possible action on the budget transfers of 3,000 or more on page 128.
Mr. Chairman, we had some discussion at the AFC. We did ultimately approve all of these, but we did take them all as one motion, including the transfer of the baritone sax.
Okay, thank you. Would someone like to make a motion to accept them all at once?
I can do the same motion I made at AFC, and I'm going to make a motion to approve all 4 items at once, all 4 transfers, including the baritone sax.
Okay. We
A
have
second by Ms. McCrevin.
Thank you. Okay. Any discussion?
I think it's actually 5, 1, 2, no, 4. Okay.
Was it 5? I thought it was 4.
I think it is 4. You're right.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so seeing no comments, we can call the roll on that.
And again, this is just to vote to take them all at once, not to actually, although you made the motion to approve them all as one.
I
correct, Mr.
did.
Brown?
I did
Okay.
that specifically so that you didn't have to count the vote twice.
That is
that's
fabulous.
It's a little tricky, Mr. Brown, but we follow it now. Thank you.
We like
yeah,
that.
I know. I thought I think I missed that on the first time around. So don't be said I can't learn from my mistakes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown.
It is 5 items. There's
5
4
items.
Yes.
4 plus the baritone sax.
4 plus the baritone.
4 plus the baritone sax.
All right. Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah.
All right. Are we ready for the roll call, Mr. Belfanti?
We are, Dr. Byers. Thank you.
Can I just ask a question? I'm sorry.
Sure.
Are we still in discussion?
Yes, we are.
Not called the vote yet. Go ahead, Ms. Burke.
Something just caught my eye, and I apologize because I know you guys don't like when I pick out little things, but I just have a question. When the dates listed, like for example, under March 2020, that's something that was something that was already incurred or intended to be incurred. For example, like I don't understand something like staff travel for year of service awards. Did that already happen prior to COVID, or that was just set aside?
Are we on the transfers?
So I think Ms. Burke, I think Ms. Burke, you're looking at the transfers under 3,000, and that's
I am. I thought we were looking. Okay, so we're only doing the ones above right now.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay, I apologize. I'll hold my question.
Well, to be clear, we actually went through that, Ms. Burke, for the under 3,000 already. So we moved on to the over 3,000.
Okay. Well, then could someone just answer my question just out of curiosity?
And
so the board does, go ahead.
The transfers under 3,000, I can approve on a monthly basis. So those that are in March are already approved. And we
Already
still,
incurred, I guess, then, right?
right. And they may or may not have placed the order yet, but the transfers have been approved. As we still do plan to award the years of service awards at some point.
And again, to be fair, Ms. Burke, we just keep that as a running list. So you'll see that it's really 2 pages and it goes all the way back to the beginning of the year. And it took me a while to figure that out myself, that it's just an ongoing list of transfers over 3,000, or sorry, under 3,000.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So at this point, we can call the roll.
Okay, Mr. Belfonte,
Yes.
Ms. Burke,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Ms. Cardozo,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. DeMayo. Thank you. Yes. Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Ms. Hubbard,
Yes.
Ms. McCrevin,
Yes.
Mr. Reed,
Yes.
Dr. Turner.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, everyone. That motion passes. The next item is the item for the next agenda due to me by May 25th, 2020. And if there's not anything else to discuss, we will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Ms. Cardozo,
We have a second?
Mr. Reed,
Mr. Reed, thank you. All those in acceptance of adjournment? Oh, we have to go through roll call. No, we can do that.
no, we can do it this way. Just show me lots of happy hands.
And I'm in
Happy
too.
hands.
Bye-bye.